Welcome. Today we're doing an in-depth exploration of the sources, detailing one of the most tragic events in recent Australian history. We're talking about the mass shooting and terrorist attack on December 14th, 2025 that took place at Bondi Beach in Sydney.
It's a very heavy topic. The scale of the loss and just the sheer complexity of everything that followed,
Mm,
politically, socially, it demands a really thorough analysis.
it really does.
So our purpose here is to meticulously go through the factual information that's detailed in the source materials you have. We'll be focusing on the specific context of the attack, the immediate response, the victims who we must remember, and the accused perpetrators.
And their path to radicalization, which is a key part of this.
Exactly. And then the fallout, especially looking at the official policy changes and that wave of misinformation that followed, it was just pervasive.
And for you, the listener, our goal is to help you move past the headlines and get a really comprehensive, nuanced understanding of what happened. This event, it's now known as the deadliest act of terrorism in modern Australian history.
And the second deadliest mass shooting, behind only the 1996 Port Arthur massacre.
Which is a staggering thought. So we have to approach this with impartiality, letting the facts from the sources speak for themselves, but, never losing sight of the profound human loss at the center of it all.
To set the scene properly, the sources are very clear that the attack specifically targeted an annual community celebration. It was called Chanukah by the Sea.
An event organized by Shabbat, right?
Yes, a major Jewish outreach organization. It was taking place at Archer Park, which is just east of the main Bondi Pavilion. The sources indicate there were about 1,000 people there.
A huge gathering.
Huge gathering. And the target was, well, it was unambiguous. It was Jewish people gathered to celebrate the first day of Hanukkah. This established, intense anti-Semitic motivation is absolutely central to understanding the nature of the crime.
Okay, so let's unpack the security background first. Australia is, globally recognized for its strict gun laws, which came in after the Port Arthur massacre in '96. What did that framework actually look like?
Well, the National Firearms Agreement after 1996 was a seismic shift. It completely recalibrated the legal landscape for firearms in Australia.
In what way?
It brought in an unprecedented level of regulation. It imposed these sweeping restrictions on automatic, semi-automatic, and pump-action rifles and shotguns.
So the most dangerous weapons.
Essentially, yes. The fundamental goal was to make it functionally impossible for a single person to get their hands on the kind of high rate of fire weapons needed for a mass casualty event. I mean, compared to a country like the United States, it set a very, very high bar for gun ownership. You had mandatory licenses, registration for every single weapon, strict storage requirements.
And for a long time, it worked.
It was largely successful, yes.
Yeah.
For almost 3 decades, it was very effective at preventing mass shootings on that kind of scale.
But this is where the source material presents a really concerning paradox. Despite those world-renowned gun laws, the sources show a clear trend in New South Wales leading up to 2025. The system was, it seems, under some stress. We see a documented increase in firearms and, critically, in licensed gun owners.
The figures are stark, you're right, and they point to a structural challenge that was there long before the terror attack. In New South Wales, the state where Bondi is, the number of individual gun licenses had jumped from 181,000 in 2001 to 260,000 by 2025.
That's a huge increase.
That's a 44% increase. And it raises some really critical questions. It suggests that while the laws were effective at choking off the supply of military-grade weapons, the legal civilian market for other types like high-capacity sporting rifles and shotguns was actually expanding rapidly.
Do the sources give any indication as to why? Why that increase?
It seems to be a convergence of factors. Some of it is attributed to rural and regional communities, licenses for pest control, farming. That's a legitimate category under the law. But a large part of the growth was noted in recreational sporting categories. And as licenses increase, the sheer volume of legal, regulated firearms in the community just goes up. That increases the pool of weapons available for potential diversion, or in this case, legal acquisition by someone who might be radicalized, but can still pass a basic background check.
So the legality doesn't equal zero risk.
Exactly. Legality does not equate to zero risk, especially when the total number of guns and owners in circulation just keeps rising. This is really the core issue with Australia's gun control structure just before the attack. Success in one area was masking a growing risk in another.
Okay, let's shift focus to the threat environment, because Australia was clearly on high alert for months before this tragedy happened in December. What were the specific warnings?
The security posture had been explicitly raised. In August 2024, the Australian Security Intelligence Organization, ASIO, which is the Domestic Security Service, officially raised the national terrorism threat level.
From what to what?
They moved it from possible to probable. And that's not a step they take lightly. It signifies a substantial, assessed increase in the likelihood of a terrorist attack happening.
And what was the primary driver for that decision? Why then?
ASIO's assessment, according to the sources, pointed overwhelmingly to the rising community tensions and the risk of political violence. And this was tied directly to the ongoing Gaza war that had started back in October 2023.
So a global conflict was having a direct impact on domestic security.
A dramatic impact. The sources indicate the conflict heightened ideological divides and generated a lot of domestic hostility, which was particularly targeting the Jewish community.
So the intelligence community was acutely aware of this. They knew that global events were translating into tangible domestic risks aimed at specific Australian communities.
Precisely. The material documents a significant reported increase in attacks targeting Jewish communities and individuals in Australia right from the start of the Gaza conflict. This context is so vital. The attack on the Hanukkah celebration didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in an environment where authorities had already identified a probable threat level and a rise in anti-Semitic acts.
Which makes the failure to prevent this particular event even more tragic.
It does. That knowledge, coupled with the immense difficulty of monitoring every single potentially radicalized individual, really sets the stage for what happened. The specific targeting was tragically foreseeable.
Let's move into the details of the attack itself, starting with the perpetrators and, crucially, the weapons they used. This is where that paradox of legally acquired firearms becomes horribly real.
The two alleged gunmen were Sajid Akram, who was 50, and his son, Naveed Akram, aged 24. The father, Sajid, was killed by police at the scene. The son, Naveed, was captured.
In their arsenal.
It was, for a civilian attack, quite sophisticated. The sources list a Beretta BRX-1 straight-pull rifle and two 12-gauge Stoeger M3000 M3K shotguns.
We should spend a moment on these weapon choices because this links directly back to that gun law paradox we were talking about. What exactly is a straight-pull rifle?
That's the critical technical detail here.
Yeah.
The post-Port Arthur laws banned most semi-automatic rifles.
Right, which cycle the next round automatically.
Exactly, using the gas from the previous shot. A straight-pull rifle, like the Beretta BRX-1, is designed to get around that definition. While it uses a rapid linear action, you pull the bolt straight back, then push it straight forward, it still requires the operator to manually cycle it between every single shot.
So legally, it's not a semi-automatic.
Legally, no. It's classified differently, which meant it was permitted for licensed civilian use, often in sports shooting.
But in practical terms, that straight-pull mechanism allows for extremely fast follow-up shots. You might lose the technical definition of automatic, but you don't lose the lethality.
Absolutely. The Beretta BRX-1 is known for being accurate and having a very fast, smooth cycling action. In a sudden, close-range attack on an unprotected crowd, the difference between that and a semi-automatic is negligible in terms of the immediate casualty count.
And the sources confirm Sajid Akram was a licensed owner?
Yes. Sajid Akram had a firearms license. He was the registered owner of 6 guns. And the specific weapons used in this terrorist attack were legally owned and licensed. That is the tragic failure point in the system.
Let's walk through the sequence of events. It started around 6:47 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. And they didn't start with shooting, did they?
No, and that's a crucial detail that speaks to the level of planning. Police allege the Akrams first tried to use explosive devices to maximize casualties. They threw 4 homemade bombs, 3 pipe bombs, and 1 made from a tennis ball into that crowd of 1,000 people.
And unbelievably, all 4 of them failed to detonate.
They did. If those bombs had functioned, the chaos, the shrapnel, the fatality count would have been so much higher than the 15 that were recorded. The failure of those devices was really an unquantifiable saving grace.
So after the bombs failed, they moved to the second phase.
Yes. The gunmen, who were dressed in black, began firing into the crowd from a footbridge. It's a footbridge that arches over the car park just to the north of the Bondi Pavilion.
The sources mention a very specific video.
Yes, the horror of it was captured in an almost continuous 11-minute video segment. It shows the final moments of the shooting and the police arriving. But what really reinforces the targeted anti-Semitic intent is a detail about Naveed Akram, the younger gunman.
What was that?
He was observed pausing his shooting. He actually waved away bystanders who were not part of the Hanukkah celebration before he resumed firing directly at the Jewish gathering.
So it wasn't indiscriminate.
It was not indiscriminate violence. It was hate-driven, specific targeting.
Turning to the police response, which came amidst this absolute chaos, what was the response time?
The speed of the response was, all things considered, impressive. The first emergency calls came in at 18.47. By 18.57, New South Wales police had confirmed their arrival and active response.
A 10-minute response time.
10 minutes. In an active threat situation like that, that's crucial. The officers who arrived immediately engaged the gunmen, who were in that elevated position on the footbridge.
And the sources credit one detective in particular with the key intervention.
That's right. A detective acting quickly and decisively is credited with it. He used a tree for cover about 40 meters away, and he targeted and shot Sajid Akram in the back of the head.
Killing him instantly.
Yes, which ended the firing from one of the two gunmen. The intensity of that firefight is reflected in the numbers.
How many rounds were fired?
The gunmen fired about 83 rounds in total at the crowd and at the police. The police fired about 20 rounds in response to neutralize the threat.
And what happened to the son, Naveed?
Naveed Akram was shot in the stomach. He was critically injured and was then apprehended under police guard. The aftermath was just overwhelming casualties. 40 people injured and over 123 ambulance personnel attended the scene to coordinate triage and transport.
We have to pause here. We've been looking at the tactical and logistical details, but now we must turn to what is truly the heart of this tragedy, and that's recognizing the devastating human cost. 15 civilians were killed. This attack is Australia's deadliest act of terrorism. It's so important that we move from statistics to the individuals who were lost.
It was a profound loss inflicted on a very diverse community. We should start with Matilda. She was the youngest victim, just 10 years old, a student, born to Ukrainian immigrants, a family's entire hope, a young life just extinguished.
The sources also name a married couple, Boris Gurman, who was 69, and Sofia Gurman, 61. They are the couple who, in an incredible moment of courage, confronted Sajid Akram before the shooting even started. We'll talk more about their bravery later, but it cost them their lives.
And then there's the story of Alex Kleitman, who was 87. The sources confirm he was a Holocaust survivor who had emigrated to Australia from Ukraine. To survive the absolute worst horrors of the 20th century, only to be murdered in an act of anti-Semitic terror in modern-day Sydney. It's just a heartbreaking story. He worked as a civil engineer in Australia.
Reuven Morrison, 62, was another civilian who showed immense bravery, a Soviet-born businessman. He charged Sajid Akram to try and stop him and was killed by the younger gunman, Naveed.
The victims also included people who had dedicated their lives to fighting prejudice. People like Edith Brutman, who was 68. She was the vice president of the B'nai B'rith, New South Wales Anti-Prejudice and Anti-Discrimination Committee. Her life was a testament to fighting the very hatred that killed her.
The leadership of the community was also directly targeted. 2 religious leaders were killed.
Yes. Rabbi Yaakov Levitin, who was 39. He was South African-born and served as the secretary of the Sydney Beth Din, and Assistant Rabbi Eli Schlanger, 41. He was British-born and worked as a chaplain for Corrective Services, New South Wales. These were men at the heart of their community.
There were others just caught in the firing as well. Dan Elkamam, a 27-year-old French national. Peter Meager, a retired police detective who was there as a freelance photographer.
Marika Pagani, 82. A Slovak-born Australian volunteer who delivered meals to Jewish seniors.
And Adam Smith, 50, a local Bondi resident just out for a walk with his wife. The sheer randomness of that underscores how the violence just spilled out.
It does. And the sources also detail incredible acts of sacrifice. Tibor Whiteson, 78, a Soviet-born automotive engineer, died while shielding his wife and Edith Brutman from the gunfire. And Boris Tetelroyd, 68, who died alongside his wounded son. The final civilian named was Tanya Tretiak, 68, who was there with her family.
The diversity of these 15 lives, from 10 to 87 years old, immigrants, professionals, religious leaders, heroes, it just illustrates the devastating scale of the human impact.
And in the face of that absolute malice, the sources also give us these detailed accounts of extraordinary heroism. Multiple civilians showed this spontaneous, profound courage, putting themselves directly in the line of fire. Their actions, without a doubt, prevented an even greater loss of life.
We have to start again with Boris and Sofia Gurman, because their intervention came before the first shot was even fired.
Exactly. Before the attack began, they noticed a clear and chilling sign, an Islamic State flag displayed on the Akros parked car. This immediate recognition prompted them to act. The sources say they struggled with Sage Akram, they tried to physically stop him, and they even managed to seize one weapon from him.
An incredible act.
But Sajid retreated, retrieved a second gun, and then shot and killed both Boris and Sofia. They were the first victims, killed for their preventative, courageous actions.
Their actions were the first disruption. And after that, we have the astonishing intervention of Ahmed al-Hamed.
Yes, a 43-year-old Syrian-Australian Muslim, a father of two. He was unarmed. His story became a global symbol of courage.
What did he do?
His actions were remarkable. He approached Sajid Akram by moving tactically, crouching between two parked cars. He came up from behind the gunman and physically seized the weapon from him, wrestled it away, and then propped it against a nearby tree, disarming the older gunman.
He removed a lethal weapon from the fight. What happened to him?
After he was disarmed, Sajid Akram retreated back towards the footbridge to his son. It was there that one of the gunmen shot and wounded Ahmed twice. So even though he was gravely injured, his intervention caused a crucial pause in the shooting and eliminated one of the three weapons from being used against the crowd.
An unbelievable act of selflessness.
And there were others. Given bitten. The sources say he had initially reached a safer location, but when he saw Al-Ahmed confronting Sajid, he made a conscious choice to run back towards the gunfire to help.
And he was injured?
He was shot several times and critically injured. And if you think about him, and Reuven Morrison, who threw a brick at the gunman before he was killed, you see this chain of continuous civilian attempts to disrupt the attack.
And the sources also mention acts of intervention on the bridge itself.
That's right. An unnamed bystander went up onto the footbridge where the firing was happening and managed to kick a weapon away from one of the gunmen. The tragic irony noted in the sources is that this bystander was then briefly mistaken for an attacker by others because of the chaos and the dark clothing. It just highlights the extreme confusion of the scene.
And finally, we have to mention the local emergency responders who are technically off-duty, the surf lifesavers.
Yes, the off-duty volunteer lifesavers from the Bondi and North Bondi surf lifesaving clubs. They immediately ran towards the gunfire into the unsecured area before official ambulance crews could even get there.
Putting themselves at huge risk.
Huge risk. The source material describes them using surfboards as improvised stretchers to move the wounded. They completely depleted their stock of bandages and first aid supplies.
And their role went beyond first aid, didn't it? They provided shelter.
They did. They acted as a safe house, sheltering about 250 people inside the club, away from the threat. This group included a heavily pregnant woman who, under the extreme stress of the moment, actually went into labor during the attack. These were spontaneous, organized acts of community defense and life-saving that were absolutely vital.
Okay, moving on from the immediate tragedy, let's look at the investigation. It was known as Operation Arcs, and it quickly started piecing together the planning and motives. What were the first critical discoveries?
The police commissioner immediately declared it a terrorist incident. That mobilized both federal and state counterterrorism forces. A key discovery on the night of the attack was 2 more rudimentary homemade bombs found inside the suspect's car.
Reinforcing that they intended maximum casualties.
Exactly, given the 4 other failed devices they had already thrown. Police raids were carried out very quickly at the Bonnie Rig property where the gunman lived and at an Airbnb in Campsie.
And the sources indicate the planning involved careful deception?
Yes, the level of forethought was considerable. It was reported that the father and son had created a cover story telling family they were going on a fishing trip to Jervis Bay. This lie let them get to Bondi without raising any suspicion, and it confirms the attack was meticulously planned months in advance.
Let's get into the profiles of Sajid and Naveed Akram to understand their path to this. Starting with the father, Sajid. What was his background?
Sajid Akram, the 50-year-old father, was an Indian national. He came to Australia in 1998 on a student visa. He later got a partner visa and then a resident return visa. Interestingly, intelligence from police in India indicated Sajid had no adverse record before he left. His family there expressed complete shock, saying they were totally unaware of any radical activities.
So his radicalization seems to have happened here in Australia.
It suggests a gradual, internal process, likely spanning decades within Australia.
And his son, Naveed, the 24-year-old, was Australian-born, but he was known to intelligence officials, which is where the failure of threat assessment really comes into focus.
It really does. Naveed had been on ASIO's radar since 2019, but critically, his file had been assessed and then downgraded. He was deemed not an immediate threat.
That raises so many questions.
It does. His radicalization path was traceable. He was a follower of the radical preacher Wissam Haddad, a figure who had himself violated Australia's racial hatred laws earlier in 2025. Naveed worshipped at Haddad's prayer space and was an active proselytizer for the street Dawah movement.
And his connections went beyond just ideology, right? They ran into actual terror networks.
Precisely. The sources confirmed Naveed was friends with Isaac el-Matari, a self-declared Australian commander of Islamic State, who is now in jail for plotting an insurgency. So the fact that an individual with known ideological fervor, who was associated with a hate preacher and was friends with an IS commander, was downgraded, that became a major point of inquiry.
In terms of motivation, the sources are clear.
It was explicitly ideological. Both gunmen pledged allegiance to IS. That was confirmed by 2 IS flags found in their car. The whole thing fits the classic profile of a lone actor attack. It was inspired by Islamic State ideology, but not directly coordinated or funded by their central command.
But IS still claimed it.
Immediately, ISIS praised the attackers in their newsletter, calling them lions and a source of pride, and noted that they had answered the call to target religious festivals.
Investigators were also very focused on a trip the two took just a month before the attack, a 28-day trip to the Philippines. What was so suspicious about that?
The destination itself. They went to Davao City on the island of Mindanao. That region is known for an ongoing Islamic State-affiliated insurgency. It's a high-risk area. The duration, 28 days, and their behavior were also red flags. They had initially booked for 7 days, but kept extending.
And what did they do there?
Filipino officials reported they rarely left their hotel room during the entire 4 weeks. Sometimes they only went out for an hour or so, and they received no visitors.
That doesn't sound like a holiday.
No. It strongly suggests a phase of final preparation, or perhaps secure communication with someone externally. The secretive movement to an active IS insurgency zone right before the attack is a central piece of evidence supporting that meticulous pre-planning.
And following his capture, Naveed Akram is now facing the Australian justice system.
He is. He was critically injured, but he survived. He was formally charged with 59 offenses. That includes 15 counts of murder, 1 count of committing a terrorist act, and 40 counts of attempted murder. He was moved from hospital to Long Bay Correctional Center, and he's awaiting trial.
The attack triggered this immediate wave of national grief, but also a very rapid, powerful reaction from the political establishment. What was the defining message from Australian leadership?
The condemnation was uniform and absolute. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called it a targeted attack on Jewish Australians, and an act of pure evil, an act of antisemitism and terrorism. And later, in a significant reflection, he accepted a shared responsibility, stating that more could have been done.
Which is rare for a national leader.
Very rare. Internationally, King Charles III expressed deep sadness, but also made a point of praising the spirit of community and love that shines so brightly in Australia.
And beyond the statements, there were immediate, tangible policy changes put into motion.
Yes. Security was rapidly enhanced. Operation Shelter, which was an existing NSW police operation aimed at preventing anti-Semitic attacks, was immediately expanded. That meant deploying more resources, more personnel, particularly around sensitive community sites.
But the most far-reaching response was on gun law reform, wasn't it? It brought the issue back to the National Cabinet.
It was inevitable. Within days, the National Cabinet, the Prime Minister, and all the state and territory premiers unanimously agreed to significant proposals to tighten Australia's gun laws, specifically targeting the loopholes the Akrams had exploited.
What were the key elements of those reforms?
First, restricting firearm ownership exclusively to Australian citizens. That's a direct response to Sajid Akram being an Indian national on a resident visa. Second, they committed to accelerating a national firearms register to provide real-time tracking of all legal weapons. Third, they plan to impose new limits on the total number of firearms a single person can legally own. And finally, further restrictions on the types of legal weapons available. A new gun buyback program was also announced.
The response also extended into regulating the ideological language that fueled the attack, specifically hate speech.
That's right. The NSW government announced plans for new legislation targeting hate speech and the display of offensive symbols. Premier Chris Minns confirmed explicit plans to designate the chant "Globalize the Intifada" as official hate speech under state law. That's a huge move, directly linking language used in protest to this violence.
Was there any move to address radicalization at its roots, through immigration or education?
Yes. The Albanese government fast-tracked a response to a report on antisemitism, promising action on all its recommendations. This included new powers for the Home Affairs Minister to cancel or reject the visas of individuals identified as hate preachers.
And a new task force was created to counter antisemitism and radicalization within the education system, acknowledging that this ideology often starts early.
And shifting to the community's response, the displays of solidarity were really striking.
It was a powerful demonstration of unity. In response to a request from Lifeblood, over 50,000 people volunteered to donate O-negative blood, shattering previous records. But perhaps the most profound act of rejection came from the Australian Muslim community.
What do they do?
Sydney Muslim leaders explicitly refused to perform funeral rites or accept the body of the deceased gunman, Sajid Akram. They unequivocally condemned the attack as barbaric and rejected any notion that his actions represented their faith.
And what was the ultimate fate of Sajid Akram's remains?
His estranged Italian-Australian wife refused to claim his body. Because no next of kin would take responsibility, he was slated for a destitute burial by the NSW government. It's a total rejection of his actions by both his family and the community. In stark contrast, the hero, Ahmed Al-Ahmed, received immense global support. Over 2.5 million Australian dollars in donations, including a significant contribution from the Jewish-American billionaire Bill Ackman.
The attack also became this powerful flashpoint for political commentary, both here and overseas, and the sources highlight that even within the Australian Jewish community, there were divergent views on how to interpret it.
This is a complex area reflecting the internal diversity of any large community. On one side, you had the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. They called for immediate, decisive government action to eradicate the scourge of anti-Semitism from Australia's public life, framing it as an attack on all Australians. The Zionist Federation of Australia echoed that.
But not all Jewish organizations shared that exact political framing.
No. This is where a significant division emerged. The Progressive Non-Zionist Jewish Council of Australia, the JCA, they issued a statement rejecting attempts to broadly link pro-Palestinian protests to the attack. They called that connection highly irresponsible and labeled it the opportunistic weaponization of this attack by pro-Israel voices.
So their concern was that conflating all pro-Palestine sentiment with this act of terror would make it harder to fight actual anti-Semitism.
Precisely. They argue that divisive rhetoric makes the real fight against anti-Semitism harder by shifting the focus from the terror act itself to a broader political conflict. This split commentary really reveals the deep ideological tensions the Gaza conflict had brought into Australian domestic politics.
The international reaction was equally intense.
Condemnation was widespread from New Zealand, India, the UK, the US, and significantly from across the Islamic world, including Iran and Saudi Arabia. New Zealand immediately deployed armed police to guard Jewish sites as a precaution.
But the political reaction got heated, especially between Australia and Israel.
It did. That was a major diplomatic flashpoint. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly rebuked the Australian government, accusing the Albanese administration of pouring fuel on this anti-Semitic fire. He specifically cited Australian policies, like supporting UN recognition of Palestine as contributing to the hostile environment.
And how did Prime Minister Albanese respond?
He firmly rejected the accusation, though he did later express his own deep concern about some of the extreme language used during pro-Palestine demonstrations here at home.
But it is important to note that leaders from all sides found a moment of unity in praising the hero, Ahmed Al-Ahmed.
His bravery cut through all the political noise. Leaders across the spectrum, including Netanyahu and Donald Trump, praised him publicly. King Charles III alluded to him and the other heroes in his Christmas message. And the attack had policy consequences abroad, too. UK authorities cited the Bondi incident when they announced that chanting "Globalize the Intifada" would lead to arrests in London and Manchester.
Now, for you, our listener, this next segment on misinformation is absolutely crucial. The event sparked this relentless wave of disinformation, showing how quickly a tragedy can be hijacked.
The information warfare was intense and highly targeted. We saw documented instances of a sophisticated attempt to confuse the narrative. For example, a website impersonating a legitimate Australian news outlet, the Daily Access, was registered on the same day as the shooting, and it purposely mislabeled the hero, Ahmed Al-Ahmed, with a different name.
Why would they do that?
To obscure his identity, to disrupt that positive, unifying story of his heroism. And the false claims often tried to shift blame entirely.
Like what?
A prominent false claim that circulated widely was that one of the shooters had previously served in the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. A blatant lie, a transparent attempt by anti-Israel actors to sow confusion and falsely frame the attack as some sort of conspiracy.
The misinformation also became highly personal, targeting citizens who were just there.
It did, and that's a deeply disturbing element. The human rights attorney Arsen Ostrovsky, who had recently moved to Australia and was present during the attack, he became the target of intense, coordinated online suspicion and false accusations. Internationally, the fabrications continued. A fake AI-generated image was posted on X claiming Naveed Akram had met with an Indian defense attaché in the Philippines,
Which was debunked.
immediately debunked as fraudulent news manufactured by Islamist accounts based in Pakistan. It was a clear attempt to insert geopolitical complexity into a localized terror act.
And state-affiliated sources also got involved.
They did. Iran's state-affiliated news agency, MER, openly called the attack a false flag and explicitly blamed Israel. This official conspiracy theory was amplified by senior IRGC officers. At the same time, other Iranian-affiliated outlets were praising the killings. This dichotomy reveals a strategy of just flooding the zone with both praise and false narratives to destabilize the truth.
And the technology itself failed.
Yes, XAI's chatbot, Grok, reportedly spread crucial factual errors about the event because of its unverified information retrieval.
We also have to touch on the domestic spread of toxic misinformation, which aimed to provoke more community tension.
The sources indicate various right-wing social media personalities circulated false, inflammatory stories aimed at provoking hatred against the Australian Muslim minority. A specific, egregious example was the claim that Australian Muslims had launched fireworks to celebrate the attack, a completely baseless story circulated solely to inflame hatred in a moment of profound national grief. The speed of the digital toxicity was almost as shocking as the physical violence.
To bring this all together for our listener, let's review the most critical and maybe surprising facts from the source material. For me, the fact that the weapons were legally obtained is the most profound and defining fact of this whole event.
It is undeniably critical. The sources confirm a licensed gun owner legally possessed the weapons used in a meticulously planned terror attack. That reveals the critical failure point in Australia's security apparatus. Secondly, the failure of all 4 homemade bombs is a shocking element that, through sheer luck or poor construction, prevented the death toll from being far, far higher. And thirdly, the immediate, spontaneous action of civilians like the Burmans and Ahmet Alham, placing themselves in mortal danger to seize weapons. That's a story of profound, life-saving heroism.
So if we connect all these dots, what does this event fundamentally reveal about Australian society and its security mechanisms?
It reveals the terrifying fragility of safety, even under a world-renowned gun control framework. It highlights that critical, dangerous link between major global conflicts like the Gaza war and the escalation of domestic security threats here in Australia. And it put immediate, intense pressure on 3 distinct legal frameworks: gun control, migration policy, and the urgent need to define and counter hate speech in public life.
And considering all the misinformation we've documented, from AI glitches to state media conspiracies and domestic provocateurs, we should end with a final thought for you, the listener. How do events like this reshape our relationship with information? And what responsibility do we as individuals bear in preventing the spread of this digital toxicity during a moment of profound national grief?
It forces us to recognize that modern conflict extends far beyond the physical attack. It moves instantly into the information space, where narratives are contested and facts are weaponized to deepen divisions. The citizen's role in just pausing, verifying information, and refusing to amplify toxicity, especially during times of high emotion and trauma. It has never been more vital for holding our society together.
An essential thought to carry forward from this complex tragedy. Thanks for listening.